What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome to the Monday show, gang. Getting a little earlier start than I was planning on. I was thinking about going at 4 o'clock today because I thought we had a 7:40 start, but that got moved up by a half hour. A little bit of rain later in the evening in Kansas City, so that game's starting at 7:10, so the slate on both sites, if you haven't heard, starting at 7:10 now. Kind of an important note. But what's going on, everybody? It's good to see everybody here nice and early. I know you've got a lot of choices of different MLB shows to watch, and we thank you for flying with us. Cujo Blues here, start of a new week. Hope everybody's Monday's going well. Monday's going just fine over here, mostly baseball focused. Lone Wolf's here. What's going on, buddy? Travis Wyndham, just in time. I think we had some people with some good results over the weekend. Nothing crazy, but I think I saw some decent discussion anyway of lineups that were at least tracking well. I know I saw a couple of you guys in good positions, so hopefully finished well. I don't think anybody won anything like took down the tournament style, but hopefully some good cashes and everything over the weekend. Had a couple positive days with just the lineups that I was rolling with. Carlos Soto, good afternoon to you too, buddy. Welcome. What's going on? So I think we've got a really interesting slate. It's just a 6-gamer to get us started for the week. So this game, as discussed, moved up to 7:10, so we've got an earlier than planned start. Really interested in this one. Seems like it's going to play clean. This is the only troubling weather spot on the early slate, but especially with the 30-minute bump, Roth really seems to like it over at Roto Grinders. Seems like it's going to play most, if not the complete game before the rain even arrives at this point. So I think we're okay there. Really like the looks of Cole Ragans. Kind of like the looks of the Royals bats. I think there's a lot to like going up against Bryce Wilson. It's also kind of interesting because there's not a lot to work with in the bargain bin. So I think Bryce Wilson on the right night, if he can replicate like the start he had last time out, kind of value at 63-62. Low end, low faith value, but I think this is a really interesting game for that reason. And we can see what comes out of the Brewers lineup. You could maybe argue for some contrarian Brewers shares. But let's take a look at the full slate. We'll jump into the run board. Mamba's here. What's going on, Mamba? Good to see you, buddy. Can unflag that now. Had to guesstimate that run total initially. This was updated, hour and a half or so ago. So we might have had some minor movement in the run lines. We'll get it updated again after the show. So the first game up is now that Brewers and Royals one. We'll talk about that one first just to get it taken care of. But sitting there in the middle of the board, an 8.5 run total. Not a great pitcher going for the Brewers. The Royals drawing a 4.59 implied total. That's actually the second highest total on this slate. You've got the Dodgers all the way at the top of the board. They're monster favorites tonight against the Marlins. They've got a 5.49 implied total. Everybody else is fairly low end other than the Royals at 4.59. Even that is not tremendous, but it's the next best one. Then you've got the Mariners at 4.10, showing a good amount of power against the Twin starter there. So I kind of like that spot, but even that is not an aggressively high total. 4.15 for the Cards. They've been super unproductive all season long. The Rangers at just 4.03, maybe a little bit low for the matchup there. So this is the one I'm kind of thinking, it's a little bit ballpark, a little bit conditions, I would imagine, at just a 7.5 run total in that game. For a matchup between Alex Wood and Andrew Heaney, seems kind of low. Definitely seems like a low total there. But there's not a ton of projectable run scoring on this slate for a slate with not great pitching on it either. So that first game on the top of the board there, the Mariners and the Twins, we've got Luis Castillo going for the Mariners. Looks pretty high end. Simeon Woods Richardson going for the Twins, making his fourth start of the season. 3.99 implied total for the Twins, 4.11 for the Mariners. Padres with Yu Darvish on the mound. Cubbies answering with Justin Steele, at least for a few innings. Steele just returning from the injured list. Hasn't done a lot of rehab work, so I'm curious to see how long he goes. It was a hamstring thing, so there's reason enough to believe that he could get 5, if not 6. But there's been no real discussion. He only made one brief rehab start and then threw a bullpen over the weekend. So I'm kind of curious to see how deep Steele goes into the game. I don't have him projected for a deep start, but both teams under a 4-run total. Pitching conditions, wind blowing in Wrigley. The Brewers and the Royals we talked about. The Mets and the Cards. Sean Manaea going for the Mets. And the Cards have, I completely forgot, Kyle Gibson. Kyle Gibson making a run of fairly deep starts. He hasn't worked less than 6 innings in any of his starts. That one sitting at 4.15 on the Cardinal side and 3.94 on the Mets side. Both teams kind of been underwhelming. The Cardinals definitely, and the Mets top heavy and some, mediocre and some disappointing performances even in the top end of that lineup. Rangers and the A's, again, this one I think we can target for maybe some more run scoring than what Vegas is calling for, with just a 7.5 run total, 4.03 for the Rangers, 3.55 for the Athletics. The Marlins drawing just a 3.14 against the return of Walker Buehler, who I do think is stretched out for a full start. He's made 6 appearances through the minor leagues. He made 5 AAA rehab starts, went 6 innings in his most recent start. We'll get there a little bit later on in the show. But they're massive, massive favorites. Even if he only goes 5 the way he's priced, I think you're all right, even on FanDuel. Major upside to win. Might be a little shaky in his first rehab start. A fair argument to be made if you get carried away with Buehler stacks, maybe a few Marlin stacks on the other side, but especially with no more Luis Arraez at the top of that lineup, they're just greatly diminished. And then the Dodgers just look tremendous with their 5.49 total, and they're just top to bottom lineup of stars. So that's a clear spot that'll, I'm sure, be really popular. I think the Mariners are drawing some popularity at the top of the board there. I think the Royals will probably get some in another kind of obvious spot for offense. Curious to see where the Rangers land. And the Athletics on the other side of that game, because even with a 3.55 total, they're going up against Andrew Heaney, who we know is targetable. Every now and then, he breaks off a good start like he did in his last one. Last time out, he went 7 innings, struck out 4. Gave up just 1 earned run, no home runs. Each of the 2 starts before that, 2 home runs in each one, a handful of earned runs. Did strike out 7 over 6 against Seattle. But Heaney at best is shaky. I do think he's got his upside. He's kind of right here in the middle of the board, and he's very, very cheap in the bargain bin at $6,600 on DraftKings. This is, to me, the best value spot on DraftKings. Sean Manaea in a different tier, probably a more reliable starter going up against an equally bad Cardinals lineup, if not a worse Cardinals lineup, despite who's in it, the way they've performed this year, and honestly going back into last year, not all that dissimilar from the A's. It's just this is a much higher price at $7,800 compared to the $66. You do have Cole Ragans at 88, top of the board Luis Castillo only at 96, 84 for you Darvish. So you can go to this Sean Manaea price, I think, easily enough in combination with those. Nobody in the 10,000s. It's kind of workable anyway, but if you're dipping into the actual bargain bin, I think Andrew Heaney is the uncomfortably sharpest option there at 66. Gibson is at 73 is definitely interesting against the Mets, given the depth to which he's pitched, the ability over time to spike some good games, and potentially rounding into form. He's had a few better games over the last 3. Last 3, he's given up 1 earned run in each start, and that's it. So he's been a little bit better, and again, he hasn't pitched fewer than 6 innings in any of his starts. 8,800, I think, is playable on FanDuel. 73 on DraftKings is definitely playable from that bargain bin. Woods Richardson could have a decent start here against the Mariners. We know how high strikeout the Mariners are, how bad they've been overall outside of their tremendous pitching staff. 7,800, 7,000. I think he projects well for the upside at that price, with additional strikeout upside if he can get through 6. It's just I am seeing a bunch of power in the home run model against him for reasons. So we'll get into that spot a little bit. Bryce Wilson, again, at 62, 63, is in that playable bargain bin. His last time out, he struck out 6 over 6 innings against the Rays, gave up just 1 earned on 4 hits. If you can do anything like that for the money against a good, not great Kansas City team that's a little bit top-heavy right now, he's not uninteresting, but I prefer the Royals on the other side of that game. Alex Wood is very, very thin and probably not a great option at 68.55. He hasn't been good at all, and that's one of the reasons I'm kind of interested in Texas. Roderick Munoz at the bottom of the lineup. I know he's been okay, but I really question the upside against the Dodgers at 74.72. Top of the board, Buehler, again, I do think is kind of stretched out, given that he went 6 in the last rehab start in AAA. Maybe he only goes 5. It is higher stress and much stiffer competition, obviously, even against the Marlins, pitching at the major league level. So maybe we're only looking at 5, but he's correctly priced for 5 given his upside. at 8,300 on FanDuel, even if you only get the win bonus, because I expect the Dodgers easily to win for him here. Even if we're not working with the quality start, I think that's a good enough price where you could probably get by with a little bit of ceiling on it, especially if he manages 6. At 93 on DraftKings, it's high given the question mark, but you don't need the quality start, so 5 innings works a little better there for the money. So I think he's in play on both sides. Darvish in pitching conditions. I know he's been shaky this year. I still have a lot of faith in the return to form for you, Darvish, over time. It's just a Chicago lineup that's pretty good. But again, wind blowing in and everything kind of plays up the pitching. At 85, 84, it's also just kind of baked in his scuffling along to start the season and Chicago's quality on the other side. That's a really good price for you, Darvish's ceiling. Cole Ragans and Luis Castillo, I think, are correctly just the top of the board, the clear-cut values. Ragans, tremendous strikeout upside, very good starter at a very fair price. 9,588 is very cheap for him against this Brewers lineup. Middling Brewers lineup on the other side, they've had some success, but I think they're pretty gettable for him here. So I really like that spot. And then Luis Castillo, even against the Twins, who have been so good and winning a bunch of ball games and scoring some runs, I think he's just got clear, at least ceiling value for the money. He's expensive at 10-2 on FanDuel. You've got $9,500 Ragans as an alternative. At 96 on DraftKings, that's pretty fair when Buehler's at 93, Steele's at 9,000 in potentially shorter starts. It's just compared to the 88 for Ragans, it's not quite, but you could honestly even probably pair those two and get away with it because there's some cheap spots that you can maybe get some quality out of, like that one. So, yeah, let's start with the first game. Now the first game up on the slate. Mom is going back to Oakland today. Yeah, I do like it, bud. I was trying to work some Brent Rooker as a one-off into a stack that I was building before. Kind of like that. I kind of like their just general quality for very cheap in a spot against Andrew Heaney. Always happy to target Heaney. Top 15 with Oakland stack on Saturday from Mamba, but been better with props and home runs. Fanatic felt we would have Gibson projected a little higher. I think we're about right. He's got like a 19-something strikeout rate on the season. He's just not a great strikeout pitcher. 19.1% strikeout rate. He's not great by, Stuff Plus doesn't love him. His xFIP is a little bit higher than the ERA. He's been walking a few too many. We're skipping ahead a little bit, not really throwing that many strikes. And he's given up all this premium contact against the Mets lineup that, again, is kind of top-heavy with a scuffling Lindor, but I don't think Francisco Lindor is all that far off, given that he's striking out at just a 16% rate, 8% barrels, 43.8% hard hits, 6 home runs, up to a 97 WRC+. I don't think we're all that far off. Pete Alonso's threatening. Starling Marte's playing well. Brendan Nimmo, despite a weak average, still getting on base tremendously, creating runs, doing his thing. So I don't really love the spot for Gibson. I think he just works well at 73 on DraftKings. At 88 on FanDuel, I do think he's playable. And again, you do have as long as you've given up, only 2, 3, 4 runs, you do have a pretty clear path to a quality start given his average depth. It's just a quality start that comes with, maybe 4 strikeouts and a few runs on it. So I never really have gotten carried away with Gibson. We're always coming up fairly conservative on him. I think he's workable at these prices, and I would endorse the play a little bit, especially at the DraftKings price. But he's never going to peak all that high. So looking at this one, again, Bryce Wilson is a starting point. 3 actual starts, but 9 total appearances. He's made a few bulk relief appearances. It amounts to a 3.0 ERA with a 4.09 xFIP over 24 innings and 3 starts. And then a couple of 3-inning performances, one where he went 3 2/3, one where he went 2 2/3. So worked a few innings in each of those appearances. It amounts to, a reasonably similar sample to some of the lower end starters on the slate. 22.6% strikeout rate, a 1.0 whip on the nose, not really generating any swinging strikes, 7.9% swinging, but a 27.1% CSW considering how low this is. He's picking up some called strikes. Stuff Plus doesn't really like him. He's a little bit below league average, 5.5 points below league average. But again, it's kind of been working okay in this small sample. It's just we've got a track record where he's been He was all right this year, 19.4% strikeouts, 2.58 ERA, but a 4.72 xFIP. 7% barrels, 35.8% hard hits. The contact was reasonable, but he's a fly ball pitcher, so you get a few home runs as happenstance. This year, he's given up a few more home runs at 4.30 in the small sample so far. It's a total of 4 home runs across 24 innings to, let's call it, like 65, 70 batters faced. I guess I could have just gone by the percentage. And then a couple years ago, a 15.5% strikeout rate, a 5.52 ERA, a 4.54 xFIP, and even more gettable for power. So we've got kind of a track record of Bryce Wilson being mediocre at best. But if he goes out there again, like I said, if he just gives us 6 innings like he did against the Rays, struck out 6 in that one, walked 2, gave up 1 earned on 4 hits, that's totally viable at 6,300, 6,200. I don't love it on FanDuel because I question what the actual ceiling is against a slate that does have some ceiling spots on it. But at 63, especially 5 innings and a win, come away with it with the Brewers getting to Cole Ragans maybe, or getting to the bullpen later. It's not a terrible spot for a bargain bin play. There's nothing more than that, just a bargain bin play, not a lot of faith behind it, not a lot of ceiling on it, but playable as an SP2. Cole Ragans at 88 looks pretty terrific to me. Last time out, 6 2/3, gave up 1 earned, 4 hits, faced 26 hitters, struck out 9, walked 3. That was against the Blue Jays. Blue Jays pretty low strikeout overall, as we know, at least at the top end of that lineup. So 9 strikeouts against them is pretty good. He only struck out 4 against the same Blue Jays team in the start before that, worked 5 innings, walked 3, gave up a 1 earned run in that start as well, just 4 hits. Pretty terrific in both of those. He's got an 8 strikeout game, a 7 strikeout game, a 9 strikeout, and 2 9 strikeout games overall this season. Working to a 28.9% strikeout rate, 8.2% walks, slightly higher than you'd want it, so is the whip, but a 3.44 ERA, a 3.16 xFIP, 12 points better than average, almost 13 points better than average by Stuff Plus. He's given up 1 home run all season in his, this will be his 8th start of the year. That home run came in his first start. That was, he gave up 7 earned runs in a start, 3 starts back against Baltimore. That was a mess. Every other start, he's given up 3 or fewer earned runs. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4 quality start bonuses in the 7 starts so far, it looks like. 1, 2, just 2 wins. That's the up and down nature of the Royals. But against Bryce Wilson, we could see some reasonable expectation for the Royals to succeed here. So I like him for the win bonus. I like him for the quality start bonus. I like him for a fair amount of strikeouts. The Brewers, not high strikeouts for most of these hitters in the projected lineup, 20.9%. They do have a 10.2% walk rate. And again, they've been kind of frisky for run creation. But some of these are fairly small samples with 80 plate appearances for Joey Ortiz, 53 plate appearances for Gary Sanchez. Much as I like him, Gary's very likely to continue this kind of a thing at the front end of the triple slash and not necessarily create runs above average, but he will hit for power if he's in the lineup. Rhys Hoskins, William Contreras at the top, and Willy Adames I do think are very good players. Adames off to a strong start with 6 home runs and 5 stolen bases. Contreras, the best hitting catcher in baseball right now. Him and his brother have been terrific. 336, 411, 519, a 183 ISO, creating runs 65% better than average, 5 home runs and 3 stolen bases. He's been fantastic. Tremendous contact profile, which is, just sustaining what he's done over time. 19% strikeouts with a 10.6% walk rate. Looks very similar to last year's production. Just locked in, and you love the spot in the lineup. So, killer catcher, one-off, even at 5,700. You're paying full price. But even with Cole Ragans on the mound, you can go to that as just a pricey one-off that probably won't be all that popular and just rely on the quality. Rhys Hoskins at 44.31 is cheap if you're stacking this team. Sanchez at 31.24 is also very cheap. There's tremendous power upside there. But you can see even those 3 guys halfway or thereabouts to the magic number, to halfway to 10. Everybody else below that and pretty significantly below that, even Adames below halfway. So Ragans' ability to limit home runs, to limit premium contact, kind of shines through. I love the strikeout upside, even against some of the lower strikeout rates. You have additionally some positional blockers here. You can roster Hoskins with either Sanchez or Contreras if this is the lineup we get again. Let me see if you guys are screaming at me about that. Doesn't look like. we do have, they're not on this slate. The White Sox and the Tigers are irrelevant. So, continuing that thought, you can get Hoskins with either one of the catchers on DraftKings, but not both. And on FanDuel, you can have any two of the three, but not all three, because it's catcher, first base, catcher. So it's a little bit awkward positionally, and then you've got a lot of other players from other teams at first base and at the catcher first base positioning, like on the other side with Pasquantino and Sal Perez. So these two teams definitely don't game stack all that well together. Especially you've got conflicts at shortstop where you want, you've among your weak players, probably doing better on the Brewers side, but they're facing the better pitcher. Not a great spot for a game stack given those positional conflicts. Anyway, Blake Perkins, 4,200, 3,400, off to a productive start. 4 home runs, 3 steals, a 134 WRC+, 266, 367, 436. Everybody in this team's getting on base at a pretty decent clip, or most everybody. Gary's very small sample. Ortiz for 27, 25. 80 plate appearances, but creating runs 38% better than average. A home run expected to hit for a little bit of power. Stolen base. Decent triple slash. Turang's off to a great start with 14 stolen bases, 299, 367, 411. Been 25% better than average creating runs. Just not a lot of premium contact at the bottom of the lineup. If you see between Ortiz, Turang, Chourio, and Frelick, what they've done so far this season. Sal Frelick is pretty low end, not a power hitter by any stretch of the imagination. Chourio is definitely expected to hit for better premium contact and much more power. He's basically done better than these guys already. 4 home runs on the season, 6 stolen bases, but just a 76 WRC plus. Kind of scuffling, but a tremendous raw talent. So there's playable spots, even down at the bottom of the lineup, but just not a great matchup against Ragans. It could be a spot where maybe you can get contrarian with the Brewers. It's a good enough lineup where you roll this 100 times, they succeed in a solid handful of them that make them playable enough. And then you could potentially get into a weak Royals bullpen. So I don't completely hate them as a contrarian stack. If you buy a bunch of Ragans, especially at that cheapo DraftKings price, at a very fair FanDuel price, I think it makes sense to maybe hedge with at least a few shares of Brewers on the other side. Ragans did come out. I'm not sure if anybody brought it up in the chat. Ragans came out in that start against Toronto after 6 2/3 with a cramp in his calf, but he needed no follow-up work during the week. It wasn't a concern. He just had a cramp pop up, and he had already gone 6 2/3 and struck out 9, so why leave him in, right? So no concerns about the depth for Ragans. I think we're looking at a full start here. So if people get away from him for that reason, so much the better. On the Royal side, going up against Bryce Wilson, you get Michael Garcia. This is a confirmed lineup, 4,700, 3,100. Very, very cheap for his counting stat upside. 4 home runs, 8 steals. Just an 82 WRC+, but an interesting enough hitter, given some very good premium contact numbers, a low strikeout rate at 19.2%, just a below average walk rate at 6.6%, so he's putting a lot in play. For the price, he's not bad. He's just 232, 280, 377. A 145 ISO. The results haven't been quite what they should add up to, given what he's done with the bat. A little bit of bad luck maybe in there. And the average and the on-base percentage aren't what you want from a leadoff hitter just in general. But a reasonable enough DFS play, the way he connects to Bobby Witt, Vinny Pasquantino, Sal Perez. I love this trio. I'm going to continue talking about it until it comes true, but Vinny Pasquantino is better than 230, 333, 407 with a 109 WRC plus, a 177 ISO, 4 home runs. This is going to go up. If he continues just doing what he's doing, 9.6% strikeouts, he's drawing a ton of walks, and he's putting the ball in play a decent amount and not striking out. He did that throughout last year, and he's improving on it so far in a small sample this year. And he also hits the ball just very hard, 46.6% hard hits this year. Last year it was 40.1, year before 46.9. Better for barrels the last 2 years, but it still needs to go up to transition into a true power hitter. But a very, very good bat on ball skills type hitter. A lot of line drives. Should get to a better ISO. Should hit a few more home runs as the season goes on. For 4,500, 2,800 at first base, I really like Vinny Pasquantino here. Bobby Witt is a star for 6,200, 4,100. Slashing 319, 375, 551 with a 232 ISO, 4 homers, 11 stolen bases. Creating runs 56% better than average, and just crushing the ball when he makes contact. 13.5% barrels, 55.9% hard hits. Hard hits are outpacing Sal Perez at 51%. Sal's got more barrels at 17.3%. He's also having a killer start to the season at 328, 388, 566, a 238 ISO, 8 home runs to lead the team, a 164 WRC+. At 9.83, he's the home run pick of the day overall today. Love Bobby Witt at 10.61. Vinny at 9.23. Down lineup, you get Hunter Renfroe at 7.96. He's really struggled so far this season. You also get MJ, who's also been scuffling along after a really good first 2.5 weeks, and then everything since then has been kind of bad. 7.27, though, there is still a lot of power in MJ's bat from the left side. Some playable parts in Michael Massey, maybe a little Adam Frazier or a cheap Darren Blanco from the last couple of spots. Nobody's been all that productive from the bottom 4. Renfroe, again, 80 home runs over the last 3 years, just 3 this season and a 157, 227, 292 with a 46 WRC+. 8.6% barrels, but just 32.9% hard hits. It's not striking out a ton. Maybe you get bat on ball against a fairly weak pitcher. You can maybe squeeze a little bit of very low-owned upside out of Renfroe, with these guys probably being a little bit more popular. Melendez still 9.5% barrels, a 39.2% hard hit. That's down in the small sample from the last couple of years. That's why I like MJ. When he makes contact, typically it's very good contact. Right now, just going through one of those stretches where he's not making much contact. 186, 252, 363, a 69 WRC+, 4 home runs that he hit, all of them in that first part of the season. A lot of strikeouts out of MJ, too. Massey, not making great contact so far this year. Last year, 39.2% hard hits. Year before, 37.4 with a 13% barrel rate in a small sample. But he does have a 292, 306, 479 triple slash. His creative runs above average with 2 home runs over his 49 plate appearances. He's very affordable at second base, hitting 5th behind this group of hitters. I don't mind Michael Massey as just a reasonable enough left-handed bolt-on. 5.81 in the home run model. Reasonable expectation of output. Frazier at 25-21, multi-position eligible, hasn't done anything this year. Last year was a 13 home runs, 11 steals. It's playable, I guess. It's never been good, but he's, at times provides some counting stats. And then Blanco, 8 stolen bases already this year, despite just a 296 on base in 27 plate appearances. So that's kind of interesting. Just one of those guys, you can wrap him around for 2,100, 2,400 in the outfield. And if he manages to get himself to first base, he's going to steal some bases. Last year in 138 plate appearances, he stole 24 bases. So maybe a little bit of sneaky value out of Darren Blanco, especially if you're building a bunch of Royal stacks. He's interesting enough. Royals bats are a yes. Cole Ragans is a big yes, especially at that cheap DraftKings price, but on FanDuel, I love the spot at 9,500. Brewers bats, particularly as a hedge. I think you could get there just as a random stack if you're building a bunch of lineups, but you don't have a particularly high exposure to Cole Ragans. It's not a hedge. You're just playing a low-owned, okay lineup for contrarian reasons. I don't think it's unplayable on DraftKings for just those reasons, but better as a hedge probably. And then Bryce Wilson, outside of just some bargain bin shares as an SP2 at 6,300 on DraftKings, I wouldn't really play him on FanDuel. I don't think you get there at 6,200. There is baked in value just from the low price, but the times that's going to succeed are few and far between. Jumping up to the top of the board, let me see what lineups we've gotten. Paul Skeens scheduled to pitch at AAA this weekend. What a tease of a tweet. That's from our pals over at underdog_MLB. Quickest on the draw with lineups from what I can tell. They get them out the quickest, especially if you go by labs where you're typically waiting, an hour. We get our projected lineups for labs, but it's a little bit more difficult otherwise. Matthew Patterson saying Brewers get no hit, regression coming big time. Yeah, again, I think they're a middling kind of a lineup, so I greatly prefer the Ragans side. That is not saying go to the Brewers over Ragans. It's just saying I think there's a playable position there, given that they'll probably be low owned. What's up, Lone Wolf? You were here before, didn't I? I feel like I said hi to you already. Yeah, welcome back. I don't know where you went, but hello. Mariners, Luis Castillo on the mound, 9,600 on DraftKings. Seems pretty cheap for the quality. 10-2 on FanDuel. The Twins have been rolling for sure. They've been scoring a bunch of runs. They've got some decent power bats. They've got a overproductive Willie Castro down by the bottom of the lineup. But Luis Castillo and this Mariners pitching staff in general, they're just different animals on the mound. The Mariners over there, 20 earned runs in their last 21 games from the starting pitching? They've just been tremendous. And Castillo's a big part of that. In his last game against the Braves, he went 7 innings, faced 25 Braves. No earned runs, just 3 hits, struck out 7, walked 1. In 6 innings against the Rangers, the start before that, 2 earned runs on 2 solo home runs. Struck out 6, walked 2, gave up just 4 hits. Still got the quality start over 6 innings. Got the win as well. 7 innings, they got the win. 2-hitter, 9 strikeouts, and a walk against Colorado at Coors Field. Dominant, amazing performance at Coors Field. Struck out 9 in 6 innings against the Cubbies. Gave up 2 earned on 7 hits. Gave up a bunch of hits and a few clunker starts as he just kind of rounded into form in the first 3. Didn't complete 6 innings in the first 3 starts, but has completed at least 6. It's 6-7, 6-7 in the last 4 starts. Tremendous upside, even against these Twins for Luis Castillo. And I think there are plenty of strikeouts available in that Twins lineup. I mentioned it the other day. It's at 22.7, but that includes Ryan Jeffers hiding here at 17.5% when he was at 27.8% over 335 plate appearances last year. So maybe the truth is somewhere in between. I don't think Ryan Jeffers has necessarily improved his strikeout rate by 10 points. He's been off to a great start this year, but I think there's some strikeouts lurking there. I think Max Kepler at 15.2. He was at 21.6 last year, and going by memory, reliably around that kind of a level over the last few years. So I think there's a few additional strikeouts hiding there. Carlos Correa right about where he should be. Trevor Larnach in 212 plate appearances last year, struck out at a 34% clip. Right now he's at 20.8% in a sample of 48 plate appearances. There's probably some strikeouts hiding there. Maybe these two guys are a little bit over the mark, Willie Castro and Christian Vasquez, but it's not unbelievable that they'd be floating between those two numbers. Carlos Santana's number is reliable. He's right around that level every year. Even Alex Kirilloff, he's down like 3 points. That could easily go back. So, I mean, this same group was at 25.2% last season. So there's an appreciable upside for strikeouts here for Castillo. As good as this team has been in terms of scoring runs over the last few weeks, I think we can all probably agree that they're going to settle in more middle of the road over time. And they're not quite the group that they've been. So it's a gettable spot for Castillo. I think he's correctly at the top of the board at 10-2 on FanDuel. The DraftKings price is easily affordable. Probably let's call these guys a tie for the highest ceiling on the slate. For the top 2 starters, it just kind of makes sense. Everybody else, I think, is lower ceiling than those two guys. Simeon Woods Richardson on the other side. Last time out, just went 3 2/3 against the White Sox. He faced 19 hitters in that short start. Gave up 7 hits. Struck out just 2, walked 2. Just 1 earned run. It wasn't a complete meltdown, but it wasn't a good start. Game before that, he faced the same White Sox team, went 5 innings, struck out 6, walked 1. Gave up 7 hits in that one as well, and actually gave up 2 earned runs in that one. Struck out 5, gave up 1 earned run in a 6-inning start against the Tigers in his first outing. So it amounts to a 20.6% strikeout rate, a 2.45 ERA, but a 4.20 xFIP in the small sample. He's given up some premium contact, but he hasn't gotten burnt. He hasn't given up any home runs yet. Just an 85.91 by Stuff Plus. And the Mariners showing some power in the home run model. I think they were first overall in the home run, the power index today. As much as this Mariners team is kind of like bumped along, there are some good players in this lineup who have underperformed, and they've still hit for a moderate amount of power. So I believe the power upside here. You can see some of the premium contact numbers are at or around where they should be. Some of these guys have better hard hit rates than barrel rates, just not elevating the ball. Julio Rodriguez. So I kind of buy into the Mariners upside against this pitcher. I think he's playable given the fact that this team has a 27.6% strikeout rate right now, and last year the same group was at 26.3%. There are plenty of strikeouts in this Mariners lineup, so it's kind of a both-sided situation. 7,000, especially in the bargain bin on DraftKings, Woods Richardson is playable from here. There is upside for strikeouts on that number. Again, a 6 strikeout game against the White Sox, a 5 strikeout game against Detroit. 6 or 7 is probably totally viable here. It's not where he's projecting, but it's viable against this team. So there's a little bit of upside there. At 78, I question it more on FanDuel. I think it's playable, but I still think you need that quality start given the ceiling of Castillo on the other side and of Cole Ragans. Not to mention some of the other quality pitchers on this slate. So I think he just gets outperformed for that price. But at 7,000 on DraftKings from the bargain bin as an SP2, I think that's a better option. I will definitely roster some Mariners against him. When the model's showing this much power on a team, especially on FanDuel, I'm going to go to it. I'll home run hunt with, I think you can home run hunt with some one-offs. I think you can stack this team. They're cheap, easy enough to get to. We've got some guys who have dramatically underperformed. Over 143 plate appearances, Julio Rodriguez has 1 home run. I still like his upside to finish the season with 25 plus. Just a .052 ISO, creating runs 14% worse than average. He's got 7 steals, but just slashing 261, 308, 313. He did this last year too. Got off to a terrible start. Finished with 32 home runs and 37 stolen bases. 275, 333, 485, a 209 ISO, 126 WRC plus. It is still very, very early in the baseball season. 5,000, 3,300. His price is down. He's very affordable for his upside, for his ceiling, for his talent. Absolutely can get him. 13.98. I think he's first overall on the home run board. I was going to make him the home run pick of the day. I forgot. I was going to make him the home run pick of the day, and then I saw that he's very popular. So the only thing you get at the top end with the Mariners is a little bit of popularity. Julio primary among them. So that's why I didn't make him the home run pick, but I love that spot for some home run upside. 5,000, 3,300. It's just too cheap for that hitter. Projects out great. Josh Rojas at 3,400, 2,800. Not ideal at third base, but he's been productive enough over 87 plate appearances this year. He's got second base eligibility for a very cheap price on FanDuel, which I love. So far, over 87 plate appearances, his creator runs 98% better than average. 3 home runs, 3 steals, 360, 442, 587 with a 227 ISO. Last year in a more realistic 350 plate appearances, 4 home runs, 12 steals, a 78 WRC plus, 245, 303, 338. And then as a tiebreaker the year before that, in 510, kind of split the difference. 269, 349, 391. Creator runs 8% better than average. 9 homers, 23 steals, but just a 122 ISO. I think this is more the hitter that we get in the long term. This is probably Josh Rojas. But for the price, that's a playable guy if you're going to this team for some power from the next few hitters. We really just need him to get on base and correlate. If he provides individual value with home runs or steals, so much the better. But he's a low strikeout option, or, 13.8%. That's hiding some strikeouts from last year. Just 19.2% the year before, though. I knew I remembered him being a better strikeout option than that. So last year was just kind of a down season for him. He's better than that 245, 303, 338 and that higher strikeout rate. So playable part from the top is the point. Jorge Polanco, 3,900, 2,800. You can't play them both at second base, but with the multi-position, and then on DraftKings at second and third, you can easily get them together. Over 140 plate appearances has been wildly unreliable. 193, 314, 328. Just a 94 WRC plus, just a 134 ISO. 6.6% barrels, 36.8% hard hits. That's down in a small sample of batted ball events from the last couple of years. He's always made tremendous contact. He does have 5 home runs. So when he's hit, in the few instances where he's gotten the good part of the bat on the ball, he has been hitting home runs in the small sample this year. But he's also striking out at a 30.7% clip. The walk rate's keeping him a little bit afloat. This WRC plus would be a lot worse if he wasn't walking that much. I do still think there's a good player here. I think he rounds into form. He's got a 9.70 in the home run model, so he's very playable tonight. In the long term, I don't know that he hits, better than like 230, 240. But I think the power is still there, and I think he'll round into form as things go on. Mitch Haniger, 3,800, 3,000. He's got 4 home runs on the season, a 142 ISO, just an 86 WRC plus, but a 9.1% barrel rate, 44.2% hard hits, and a long track record of hitting for power. Cal Raleigh has 8 home runs. He leads the team. He's got a 229 ISO. His creator runs 11% better than average. Another player just putting tremendous bat on ball right now. 16.7% barrels, 56.1% hard hits. Bottom of the lineup for power, you get Mitch Garver if he's in there, and Luke Raley at 8.38 and 10.36 in the home run model. Raley at the lower number. Both are very cheap. Both do have appreciable power upside. They're limited hitters. They both strike out too much. 33% so far for Garver, 29.7 for Raley in 112 and 64 plate appearances. But they both have reasonable power upside. You get Raley in the outfield for 3,000 on DraftKings. Garver's a catcher. Can't play him and Raleigh in the same DraftKings lineup. You can on FanDuel. You don't need Ty France necessarily at first base. You get Dylan Moore at 4 positions for just 2,700. Some interesting cheap flexibility from the bottom of the Mariners lineup. It's not a great bunch of hitters, but there's reasonable power here. Everybody's inexpensive. He plays 4 positions. On DraftKings, it's more straightforward. They are cheap, but you're looking at catcher, outfield, shortstop just for three straight positions, and there are probably 3 better options than that, including at the top of this lineup for 2 of those positions. So probably a more interesting FanDuel stack, given that we're looking for some home run power out of it, given the cheap multi-position flex. But playable for sure on both sites against this pitcher. The Twins, I do think they're playable because everybody's still kind of cheap, and they have, again, been pretty productive. 47 is your price high point for Edward Julian at the on the DraftKings slate at second base. 3,400 is the high point for Ryan Jeffers on the FanDuel slate, with Julian right behind him at 33. Got a lot of run creation so far this year. For the 9-man lineup, that's an average of 121. Only Carlos Santana in 123 plate appearances and Christian Vasquez in 70 in this projected lineup are below average for run creation. Oh, weird little lineup from the Brewers. It's William Contreras, Joey Ortiz, Hoskins, Adames, Perkins, Gary Sanchez hitting 6th, Sal Frelick, Jackson Churio, and Andrew Monasterio in there. So it's most of the players that we talked about plus Andrew Monasterio instead of whoever the hell we had at the bottom of the lineup. So just go back real quick because, again, that's the first game. So Joey Ortiz gets a little bit more interesting for 27-25 moving up the lineup. He's been a productive hitter. And then Gary Sanchez loses a little bit of the moderate upside that he had, dropping from up here to down here. Still positionally blocked with him, Hoskins, and William Contreras. Adames about the same. Blake Perkins the same. Andrew Monasterio at 22,000. You do get a dead min triple position eligible player at the bottom of the lineup now. Last year in 315 plate appearances, he was all right. 13% worse than average for run creation, but 259, 330, 348, hit 3 homers, stole 7 bases. For the dead min, that's okay if you just had to stick it in for one lineup at second base or shortstop or something. It's not ideal. It's not a priority spot by any means. You can see how low projected he is. Just a 1.42 against a really good pitcher, and 1.42 in the home run model. So just wanted to show that because it's a weird little lineup. Continuing with the Twins. So, again, there are a lot more strikeouts, I think, than this lineup is currently revealing, but they've been good. 2 home runs so far on the season for Alex Kirilloff in the leadoff spot, 239, 301, 435. Creating runs 8% better than average. I will check if this lineup's actually out. And it is. And it's different. We can do this one quick, I think. We also don't have that many games. We got plenty of time to talk. Plenty of time to look at the confirmed lineups. While I'm doing this, hit the like button if you haven't already. Hit the subscribe. If you get a chance, jump over to acemind.io and check those guys out. If you're looking for an optimizer, if you're looking for shockingly affordable for what you get out of it, sim tools. If you're looking for something, even if you don't believe in sims for whatever reason and you don't want to go that route, you just want something that'll build you out thousands and thousands of lineups really, really quickly, and then you can drop those into whatever your sorting tool is and has been for years, which I've done as a quick way instead of using a traditional optimizer. Every time you run a sim, if you pick the largest slate, say you pick the nickel on FanDuel and there's 80,000 entries, that thing goes and builds 80,000 lineups. Some of them are going to be crap. Some of them are going to be really good. So you can just take those and drop them into a sorting tool, a traditional Excel sorting tool, and get the good lineups really, really quickly that way. Even if you're just using it at that low end of level. They've also got a real traditional optimizer. They've got, obviously, the sim tools. It's just a killer site, and they're not asking for a lot for their subscriptions. If you go over there, you can check them out for free for 3 days. And then if you use promo code rotoscouts when you decide to subscribe, all caps, all one word, rotoscouts, 20% off your first month. And now on with the show. So we get Alex Kirilloff in the top spot. We get... I didn't edit this. I was like, wait a minute, that's the same. I forgot I was supposed to be doing that while I was doing the promo. All right, so it's Julian in the top spot. Kirilloff dropping to third. Jeffers is not in the lineup. Larnach jumping up to second. Kepler still hitting cleanup. Correa, Willie Castro jumping up to the sixth spot. Santana, Christian Vasquez here, and Manny Margot. Well, shut your car alarm off. It's going to annoy the hell out of me if I don't take care of that. Hopefully you guys can't hear that in the background. So, all right. So the Twins lineup changes a little bit. You get a pretty strong run of lefties at the top of the lineup now against Luis Castillo. Not that it really, really matters. But it is, 6 of these hitters now will be from the left side of the plate, including Castro and Santana, switch hitters. And these guys have been productive. Julian, again, their best power bat so far this season. 7 home runs for him on the year. A 250 ISO, a 130 WRC plus, making tremendous contact so far at the plate. Continuing the good things he was doing from last year, 4,700, 3,300, projects out as their top bat. Larnach at 41-31, so far slashing 381, 438, 571 with a 190 ISO over just 48 plate appearances. But he's hit 2 home runs. His creator runs 88% better than average. Last year in 212, he hit 8 home runs. Was at a 99 WRC plus, but a 202 ISO. Solid power bat. Very good contact in that sample last year. Very good contact out of the gate this season. Kirilloff, also pretty productive for premium contact. Just 239, 301, 435, but a 196 ISO. Still creating runs 8% better than average. Only 2 home runs, but reasonably good contact and probably a lot of upside. Just not against this pitcher. It's not a great spot. 4,300 and 2,900 for Max Kepler is very affordable. Double-digit barrel rate, 40+% hard hits. Better last year. Only 66 plate appearances so far, 2 home runs. Still like him to finish above 20 home runs if he can manage 450 or so plate appearances. He is that guy. Carlos Correa for 46-28. Not bad. Creating runs 22% better than average. Not hitting for a lot of power so far. Just a .088 ISO and 1 home run in 70 plate appearances. But a 44.2% hard hits. We just lost a few barrels so far. Last year, the hard hits and the barrels were there. Year before, same thing. It's a long track record of being a pretty good player. So I think we can go to Correa for pretty good prices at shortstop if we're stacking the Twins in a bad spot against Luis Castillo. But again, I don't really want to stack this team. Willie Castro has been really, really productive lately. Stole 4 bases. He had 0, or maybe 1 like a week ago. Stole 3 bases, maybe all 4. Just recently, up to 277, 339, 446, creating runs 26% better than average. He's got 2 home runs on the season. Last year, he stole 33 bases, hit 9 home runs in just 409 plate appearances, a 109 WRC plus. He's playing every day. They've got some injuries on this team, so he's out there basically every day now. 3,900 shortstop and outfield eligibility is interesting on DraftKings. Third base shortstop and outfield is even more interesting for 3,000 on FanDuel. Maybe later in the week, but yeah, maybe when they're not facing the Mariners pitching staff. How about that? I don't know how playable the Twins are going to be all week long. These Mariners are really good on the mound. Carlos Santana, 4 home runs on the season, but everything else has been pretty bad. Vasquez, even worse, just 1 home run, two stolen bases, oddly. I hadn't noticed that. 42 WRC plus, but hasn't been good at all. And Manny Margot mostly here for defense. Not really a good option at the plate. So if you're going to the Twins, it's really top 6. Any combination of those 6 guys I'm okay with. It will be low owned. It will be a super contrarian position. It's just you're going up against a really, really good pitcher who is seemingly rounded into form for the season. Luis Castillo, big yes. Simeon Woods Richardson as a SP2 at 7,000 from the bargain bin on DK. Given the strikeout upside, there is a little bit of potential there, but it's pretty low faith. I think the Mariners get him. We're seeing a lot of power on the Mariners side, so the Mariners stack and Mariners one-offs for me are definitely a yes. And the Twins a lot more low end given the pitcher on the mound, but for contrarian reasons, for the fact that I guess that they've been productive and on a roll, and they're still very cheap. A lot of lefties. Maybe you can grab a few contrarian stacks, but it's not a priority spot. If you're just getting here, we've already done that Brewers and Royals game. What's up, Jake Swales? Jake Swales looks like he's just getting here. Monty Pritchett says Rocco moved Castro up the lineup recently. He's been batting third occasionally as well as seventh and eighth. Perhaps that keeps his price below his worth. Yeah, I do think he's a valuable player. It's just, again, in this spot, particularly against Castillo, but probably in the next couple of games as well against these other really talented Mariners pitchers. I just don't love that matchup, and I'm not going to like it throughout this week. But I did pick up Castro in the Dynasty League just as a fill-in because I'm not getting much out of a utility spot. So I threw him in there for this week, looking for some stolen bases if nothing else. Trey's here. Trey says, hopeful as well. My Braves can't hit and can't pitch. Time to throw the season away. I have not gotten MLB The Show yet. I haven't been playing a ton of games for some reason lately. Just haven't gotten around to it. I was knocking out a book trilogy that took up a bunch of free time instead of that gaming or do something else kind of time. So maybe I'll jump back in. Maybe I'll grab it this week. Jake Swale says Oakland stacked better than Heaney Chalk. I agree with that. I do think Heaney's playable in that spot. We'll get back to it in a minute, and I talked about it at the top of the show. But yeah, I'm kind of interested, especially if Heaney's getting really chalky as one of the better value options. I do think from that bargain bin, he's probably the highest ceiling guy, given the matchup, given the fact that he can be a good pitcher and find a bunch of strikeouts on the right day. But more often than not, he's been getting beat over the last few years. So I do think that's an interesting spot for some, Nevin Ruiz and Brent Rooker most particularly. And J.D. Davis if he's in the lineup. All right, so let's knock this one out. Good pitching weather in Chicago. By all accounts, it says, let's see, most recently, it is going to be 60 degrees, but a 10-mile-an-hour wind blowing directly in from center field plays up the pitching side of things. I don't love chasing conditions all that much, but when I've got good pitching involved, and Yu Darvish, I do still think, despite just a 21% strikeout rate, despite a slightly below average stuff plus rating across his arsenal to start this season, 3.45 ERA, a 4.07 xFIP, just mediocre results so far this year, I do think Yu Darvish is still a very, very good pitcher. So when we're talking about a guy like that, even against the Chicago lineup that I have a healthy respect for, as we've said a bunch of times this season, and we'll continue to say if they continue getting on base and creating runs, it's a pretty playable spot for Yu Darvish here at 8,500 on FanDuel and especially at 8,400 on DraftKings. Just takes the edge off of a few short starts recently. His one start back from the injured list. He went just 5 innings, faced 18 hitters, struck out 3, walked 0, gave up just 3 hits. Was pretty decent in that game, but short start. Before going on the injured list, 5 innings against the Dodgers, just 2 strikeouts, 2 walks, gave up 3 earned. A 3-inning start against this Cubs team, faced just 16 hitters, struck out 4, walked 3, 4 earned runs on 4 hits. That was a problematic one. If they do that one to him, obviously it's going to burn us. A 6 strikeout game, a 7 strikeout game, worked 7 innings in the 6 strikeout game against the Cards, 5 innings in the 7 strikeout game, that was against the Giants. I don't think he's that far off the mark. 10% swinging strike rate, but just a 24.6% CSW. Last year, that was 10.7 and 29%. Missing the zone a little bit. If you watched any of his early starts, he was definitely struggling to find his command with some of his breaking stuff. A lot of balls in the dirt. He's a mix and match type pitcher with a deep arsenal of pitches, so he'll get out there and figure things out on the mound. If one thing's not working, he'll throw something else. A lot of junk. But I don't think we're all that far off the mark. I don't like the 92 miles an hour of exit velocity, the 48.2% hard hits. He's missed barrels, hasn't gotten burnt for home runs yet, but this is a little bit of premium contact on a fly ball launch angle. So that's something to watch. I do think you can play the Cubbies against him, but again, with that dead-on headwind, it's not great for bats. Nico Horner, if we're just looking for station to station, though, that might still work. Nico Horner, 358 on base percentage, creating runs 19% better than average. Just 4 stolen bases, but that'll go up. Stole 43 last year in 688 plate appearances. As long as he's hitting here and getting on base, those stolen bases will go up. Mike Tauchman for just 42, 3,000 across sites, 3 home runs, getting on at a 404 clip over 114 plate appearances, creating runs 48% better than average. Very cheap for a correlated scoring play. Last year, 8 home runs, 7 steals, but got on at a 363 clip. This will probably come down, but a good on-base percentage from Mike Tauchman is part of the equation. So I don't mind the option. He draws a fair amount of walks. Probably strike out a little bit more than this, but not by much. So for a fair price, he's certainly playable here. Ian Happ, 4,800, 2,900. Hasn't been good. Just 1 homer, 1 steal, a .084 ISO. Still managing to create runs 3% better than average on the back of a 355 on base. The hard hits and the barrels haven't really arrived on the season, striking out a little bit more than he did, but still draws a lot of walks. I think Ian Happ rounds into form and becomes Ian Happ as time goes on. Chris Morel for 45.34, totally playable, 7.77 to lead the team in the home run model. We also got Patrick Wisdom in the 7 spot if he's hitting down there, 7.36 in the home run model. Should have checked if we had this lineup. Doesn't look like we do. So if these guys are playing together, Morel, Michael Busch for 46, 3,000, and then Patrick Wisdom, decent amount of power upside for the money there. If Darvish struggles for power or for premium contact against any of these guys, they could absolutely take him deep, even with a bit of a headwind. There's a lot of power in that group. Dansby, 4 home runs, 4 steals, but just an 86 WRC+. I think everybody out there right now knows that I like Dansby to turn things around, and we're still getting 11.6% barrels, 41.9% hard hits in the small sample of batted ball events. I think we'll be fine for the relatively cheap for the long track record of talent and DFS output, Swanson. Pete Crow Armstrong, the rookie at 35.26. Productive few plate appearances, a home run, 2 stolen bases. Just an 81 WRC+, but it's only in 37 plate appearances. I care more about the fact that he's hit for a little bit of power and gotten involved in the offense so far. John Gomes, a skippable catcher at the bottom of the lineup. The pods, let's see if we have this one. I don't think we do. So Justin Steele, I just don't know what we're working with in terms of depth. He made a 4 2/3 inning start to begin the season, faced 18 hitters, struck out 6. It was a good start. He was rolling against Texas, and then he came out with a hamstring strain. We haven't seen him in the show since. He made 1 rehab start, went 3 1/3. Doesn't really help us figure anything out. And then he threw a bullpen over the weekend. I think we're looking at just like 4 to 5 innings here. I don't think we're in line for like a really tremendously deep start. As good as Steele is, I don't know how playable he is at 9,000, 9,200. Last year he had a 24.6% strikeout rate, a 3.06 ERA, a 3.32 xFIP, just a 5% walk rate. He induced an 11.6% swinging strike rate. It's too small a sample to even be reasonable to discuss this year. Maybe at 9,000 on DraftKings, you could get away with it, especially if you're building a bunch of lineups. If you're building a full portfolio of 150, I think other places are pulling his innings projection down a little bit too. So I can't imagine he's going to be crazy popular here. In a good pitching spot, maybe you can justify it where you don't need the quality start. You just need the Cubbies to get the win for him. But there are a lot of other better pitching options in that price tier. So it's a little shaky there. And then at 92, I would be pleasantly surprised, if we got 6 in a quality start. I also think the Padres on the other side are kind of interesting, even in pitching conditions. It's another team where there's enough quality in that lineup that they could get him without even hitting home runs and stack up a decent amount of runs. And there are enough good power hitters in that lineup. You can see them all right in here. That I think even with the headwind, you could still see some home run upside. Luis Arias being added to the top of this lineup. The Marlins decided to give up on their season in early May after making the playoffs last year. Kind of inexplicable move by them. Acquire a couple mid-level prospects. But Arias, two-time batting champion, only cost $2,900 at second base on FanDuel and $46 on DraftKings. Those are still Marlins prices. Those are not now hitting in front of Fernando Tatis Jr. prices. So definitely interested in Luis Arias. 311, 354, 385 after a slow start. He's up to a 114 WRC plus. I think he went 4 for 4 in his debut with the Pods the other day. Definitely a dynamite addition that really stretches this lineup out. I was already saying it in the first couple of weeks of the season. This is a deeper Padres lineup than it had been over the past few years. And adding him to the top of it just makes it completely different. I think it's a tremendous lineup now. So I'm excited to see it. Steele could definitely shut them down over 4 or 5 innings. So it maybe not the best spot to get excited about them. But going forward, I think this is an interesting ball club with him at the top of the lineup. Tatis for just $5,100 on DraftKings is very, very cheap for his upside over there. Another player who, maybe he's underperformed a little bit, but he still created runs 29% better than average. He's got 7 home runs. He's got 4 stolen bases. He's got a 201 ISO. He's got, more importantly, a 12.6% barrel rate, 53.2% hard hits in the small sample. I can't really figure out why he's quite so cheap on DraftKings at 51. 4,000 is correct on FanDuel. He should be minimum 57, 58 on DraftKings, and easy enough to argue that he's a $6,000 player. Definitely think you could take advantage of Fernando Tatis, even against Steele. Jake Cronenworth at 43.31 is holding down that third spot in the lineup pretty effectively. Got to give it to him. 278, 347, 496 with a 218 ISO, creating runs 44% better than average, 11.4% barrels, 42.1% hard hits, hitting for a believable amount of power so far. Only striking out at a 15.7% clip. That's not that much, shockingly lower than the 18.6% from last year, walking at the same decent rate. Manny Machado, another player. He's got 5 home runs on the season, but just a 152 ISO. A little bit down in the triple slash. So another player that maybe people would say he's underperforming. That's why he's cheap. 4,800, 3,500. He's a little bit cheap on FanDuel. He's a lot cheap on DraftKings. Still creating runs 10% better than average. Does have those 5 home runs. And still a 12.9% barrel rate. 51.5% hard hits. Not striking out all that much more than he did last year. I don't think we're far off with Manny Machado. Jurickson Profar has been tremendous, 344, 430, 533, creating runs 81% better than average. None of it is real, but he's continued to do it over 142 plate appearances. So I think while he's rolling, you can absolutely go there. Good spot in what should be a productive lineup over time. Bogarts has underperformed, but he's very, very cheap at 42.28. I also think that the turn is coming for him. I don't have as much to base that on with current season performance as I do with some of these other guys. I just kind of believe in the track record with Xander Bogaerts. I don't think he's just shot. So 4,200, 2,800 in the middle infield spots, I think you could take your shares. Luis Campusano, playable catcher bat. Ha-Seong Kim, late in the lineup for just 3,200, triple position on FanDuel. 41 as a shortstop on DraftKings. Hasn't been great this season. 5 home runs, 7 stolen bases, though. A 106 WRC plus. Little bit of counting stat production from a player that we know is significantly better than his output over 154 plate appearances. Just not a great spot in the lineup, but that'll render him probably lower owned than he should be. And he's very flexible to move around in stacks. So kind of important on FanDuel. Less so on DraftKings, but very playable at the price. And then Jose Azocar, kind of an afterthought, but he's had a productive 44 plate appearances. We'll give him that much. Darvish is a yes, especially just where he's priced. I think it's a very effective price for you, Darvish's ceiling, in a game that, again, conditions favoring the pitching. Cubbies bats, especially as a hedge to a big Darvish position, certainly on the board, but kind of lower end than some spots we've seen the Cubs. They're a non-priority playable type stack, let's put it that way. Padres, a little higher priority, I think, but also just kind of playable, given the quality of Justin Steele for at least the first 4 or 5 innings of the game. And then Steele, more playable on DraftKings, less so on FanDuel. Don't really know what it looks like beyond the 5th inning for him. So I'm a little concerned for the money. If he was priced down like Darvish is, it would be a different story. You get a little bit more potential value out of it. It was just a hamstring thing. Nothing with the arm, nothing with the shoulder, nothing like that. So Could he go out there and throw 6-7 innings? It's certainly possible. I just don't love it after a lot of time off. That start against Texas came on March 28th. So we're talking about a month off with just one rehab start and then a bullpen session. I don't know what the upside looks like. I don't know what the form looks like either. You got to keep in mind, he was just coming out of spring training. A lot of these guys take a little bit of time through March and April to round into form over starts. So, little bit of concerns at the price for Steele. We did this game already. If you want the Brewers and the Royals, you got to rewind to the beginning of the show. That's good news for people who missed that part of the show. All right, Mariners lineup came out. Rojas, Julio, Polanco, Mitch Haniger hitting 4th, Cal Raleigh 5th, Ty France, Mitch Garver, Luke Raley, Dylan Moore. I think that's exactly what we had. We did the Twins already. We had the Royals when we did it. We did the Brewers. I think we're caught up. Cardinals lineup is here. Let me grab that. So, Sean Manaea as a starting point. 7,800, he's definitely on the board for like a fair mid-range price for what he gives you on DraftKings. The only issue with Manaea really is that he typically just works short starts. 29 and a third innings in 6 starts this year. He's only completed the 6th inning once. That was his first start of the season. He's only come out in the 6th inning once. That was his first start of the season. It was also probably his best start. That was against Detroit. He faced 20 hitters. He struck out 8. He walked 2. He gave up just 1 hit and no earned runs. 5 innings in the next start, struck out 6 at Cincinnati. That was also a good start. I was expecting Cincy to get him in that one. In the next game, just 3 2/3, he gave up 6 earned and 8 total runs on 9 hits, 4 strikeouts, 3 walks, and a home run allowed to the Royals in a home game. An okay start against the Dodgers. He went 5, struck out just 3, but it's the Dodgers. He walked 3, he gave up just 2 runs on 4 hits. A good 4 2/3 performance. Struck out 6, but walked 4. No runs on 4 hits against the Giants at San Francisco. 2 starts back. But that's just 4 2/3. You fall short of even a win bonus. You fall short of well short of a quality start. It's shaky. And then against the Cubs in his last one, another game, just 3 strikeouts, 4 walks. So you get a lot of walks. You don't get a lot of depth. He's a very, very shaky option, but the Cards have been awful this season. It amounts to a 23.4% strikeout rate, a 14.1% walk rate. That's way too high. You can see the difference. The xFIP number is the believable number. If you go by Sierra, I'm sure it's right in the same territory. 3.07 ERA is deceptive on the surface. He's only given up 1 home run all season, 0.78% home run rate. 41% hard hits on a reasonably high launch angle, 89.3 miles an hour of exit velo. Last year, on better contact numbers, it was 2.81. The year before, 4.32. 158 innings in mostly starts that year. This was 10 starts and a bunch of bulk relief work. So questionable in terms of the limitation of power upside against. But the Cards are dead last, tied for dead last in the league for home runs this year with the White Sox. And the only team that they're better than for total runs scored is the White Sox. They've been really, really bad. So as a 5-inning starter at 7,800 on DraftKings, I think Manaea is definitely on the board. Better than a dart throw. Projects out right here. All right, so that's a competitive spot. Like I said at the top of the show, if you've got the money, Manaea is a much, much better option than Andrew Heaney most of the time, even with the, the Cards have underperformed even the Athletics for runs and for home run power. Overall, is this a better, more talented lineup? Probably. At least a lot more name brands in it. But this is a better spot. So if you've got the money to afford it, I really do think Manaea's got quality there. I just question where you get to ceiling-wise. I don't know what the true ceiling on FanDuel looks like against some clear 6-inning options with quality start upside. If he happens to go 6, then you're there. 7,500 is a good price for Sean Manaea's strikeout upside. Got to control the walks against a team that does draw some walks. But otherwise, I think it's at worst, very playable here, moderately playable there. The Cards lineup with Jose Fermin in the top spot, 2,100 on both sites. Third base eligible on DraftKings, shortstop, second base on FanDuel. 9 plate appearances so far this year, just 61 last year. Critter runs 24% worse than average, 235, 339, 255 in that sample. Was not expecting Jose Fermin to pop to the top of the lineup here. Six home runs and 9 stolen bases in 330 plate appearances in 2022 in AAA for Cleveland. It's like our high point. 456 plate appearances back in 2019 in A-ball. He hit 6 homers and stole 28 bases. He's 25. Given the spot in the lineup, if you feel like targeting Sean Manaea, it's fine. The very, very low price, middle infield spots on FanDuel. I prefer this, either of those positions, than occupying third base with him, especially when you want Arenado if you're stacking the cards. So he's a better option on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. Probably pretty skippable on DraftKings. Wilson Contreras, like his brother, great spot in the lineup. 275, 398, 539. Creating runs 68% better than average. He's been by far the Cards' best hitter so far this year. 13% barrel rate has led to 6 home runs at 265 ISO. He's even gotten 2 stolen bases. Tremendous hitter. Excellent catcher option. 5,600, it's just like the other Contreras. You just easily pay that even as a one-off position on the DraftKings slate. You're just paying a premium to get to a catcher. Goldschmidt has been bad so far this year. 41% hard hits is fine, but the barrels have abandoned him. Slashing just 208, 298, 280, a 73 WRC plus. Very un-Goldschmidt-like. He's declined over the last couple of seasons, but I was expecting a lot better than this. I think he rounds into form over the long term. You can see just last year, 11.9% barrels, still 50.7% hard hits. I think he had, 25 home runs? 25 home runs. Arenado had 26. Gorman, who's not in the lineup, led the team last year. Arenado does seem to be coming around a little bit at the plate. He's up to 287, 352, 395. Creating runs 18% better than average, but he's hitting for no power. He's got 2 home runs, but just a 109 ISO. It's a little bit concerning with both of these guys as low as they are for power. That's an average ISO of just .090 between their two alleged stars. The more concerning thing for Arenado is after a dip in barrels and hard hits a little bit last year, so far this year, over 145 plate appearances, 1.9% barrels and 28.7% hard hits in his batted ball events. It's a little bit concerning. He is making it work for average and on base and creating runs, though. So right now he's playing like a correlated scoring play from the middle of the lineup at third base. But I do think if you're going to the Cards, you don't really skip Arenado. You probably don't really skip Goldschmidt. Dylan Carlson back in the lineup, 2,400, 2,500, just 3 plate appearances so far this year. Last year, 5 home runs, 3 stolen bases, and 255. The year before, 8 homers, 5 steals, and 488. Has never really been all that productive. He is a switch hitter. People do like him. I don't know. I need to see it before I really fall in love with the play, even for price, from the middle of an underperforming lineup. You get a second catcher with Ivan Herrera. 3 home runs on the season, but just 210, 261, 355, a 76 WRC plus. Brendan Donovan dipping in the lineup for the lefty-lefty matchup. 4 positions on FanDuel for 2,900. He's a lot more appealing when he's leading off, but that still has its appeal if you're stacking this team up. You can use Brendan Donovan from the 7, even in the lefty-lefty. Maybe he books 2 plate appearances late against a righty. Certainly not coming out of the game if he's starting it. Mason Wynn, 3,100, 2,800, has been a little bit productive. 5 steals, down to a 99 WRC plus, hasn't hit for power. And then Lars Nootbaar in a lefty-lefty, not ideal, but again, with the idea that maybe he gets some righty plate appearances. He's off to a bad start this year, but we do know there's a little bit of home run upside, a little bit of stolen base upside from the lefty. Use him as a cheap wraparound play. Maybe you use Lars Nootbaar, you skip Furman, and you just go straight line through there. On the Mets side, Kyle Gibson. Again, Kyle Gibson has not gone fewer than 6 innings in any start this year. Went 7 innings in his last start. He struck out 9 at Detroit. A very good game. Good for DFS, good for everything. Gave up a home run, just 1 earned, 4 hits, walked 2. Faced 27 hitters. It was a very good start for Kyle Gibson. The 4 starts in a row before that, he went exactly 6 in each of them. The 2 most recent ones, one against Arizona in St. Louis and one against Milwaukee in St. Louis, Gave up just 1 earned run in both of those starts. Struck out 6 against the Diamondbacks, who were pretty low strikeout. Struck out just 3 against the Brewers, who were moderate strikeouts. 5 hits against the Diamondbacks, just 3 against the Brewers. And again, just the 1 run in both of them. So quality starts in both of those. 1 win out of that group. He's been low in for wins with the Cards struggling. In 6 innings in each of the 2 starts before that, he missed the quality start bonuses because in one of them he gave up 4 earned on 6 hits, struck out just 2, walked 3, and then gave up 7 earned on 7 hits over 6 to the Miami Marlins in his second start of the year. Struck out 5, walked 1, gave up 2 home runs in that game. Gave up 2 home runs in his first start. That was at San Diego. He went 7, gave up just the 2 solo shots, struck out 4, walked 2. So I think overall, more times than not, especially against a relatively low strikeout Mets lineup, 21.6% last year in a full season, 20.2% so far this year. More often than not, we get one of those 3 to 5 strikeout type performances from Kyle Gibson. Probably goes 6. Most likely gives up a couple of runs. I don't think it's a dominant Mets spot by any means. I just don't think it's a crazy great value spot. I think it's 7,300 for 6-7 innings and a reasonably okay performance. That's a dart you can throw a few times. Probably a little bit better than a dart on DraftKings. He's very cheap over there. If he has a good game, so much the better. You've succeeded. At 88 on FanDuel, even with the quality start being likely, just given the low end strikeout potential in most of his starts, a 19.1% strikeout rate for the season, by the way, with a 9.2% walk rate, just 9.9% swinging, 26.9% CSW, and no real track record of being a tremendous strikeout pitcher. He's right around this guy every year. So I just question the true ceiling. Yeah, maybe he does better. If he goes 6 or 7, gets the quality start, he's going to outperform the 24-point projection. Low 30s. Maybe he cracks the mid-30s, but how many 40-point FanDuel games are we getting out of him? How many 50-point FanDuel games are we getting out of him in this spot? If you roll this 100 times, I don't think it's that many, and I think his ownership probably outpaces the rate at which you're getting those big ceiling games. Again, on a slate with 2 clear ceiling pitchers and a couple other potential ones. So he's playable here. He's much better over here. He is on the board for both sites. I just don't love it. If you're playing Mets, Nimmo at the top of the lineup, still getting on at a 375 clip. Creating runs 27% better than average. Hasn't really hit for much power. 3 home runs, a 148 ISO. Last year he hit 24 home runs, had a 193 ISO. 221, 375, 369 overall on the triple slash. He's underperforming given the average where it is, but the tremendous on base, the lowish strikeout numbers, and a very, very good walk rate, mixed in with some very good contact at the plate, definitely keep Brandon Nimmo alive, especially at 3,200, 4,500. Not an uninteresting bat to start things off against Kyle Gibson. Starling Marte for 44, 30, 31, 274, 321, 403, a 112 WRC plus, 4 homers, 7 steals. Mamba says the Cardinals are a Mamba alert. Look out for that one. Matt Pat likes Arenado here. Should rake. Matthew Patterson's taking Rooker for the home run pick. Don't dislike it at all. Aggressive Goose, hopefully you were here just a minute ago when we went over Jose Furman. Let me know if not. A 25-year-old middle infielder with maybe some stolen base upside, but not overly appealing outside of just being cheap at the top of the lineup. Mamba saying double up on home run prop. Contreras and Donovan. Donovan is an interesting call on that spot. I would imagine you're getting a pretty nice price on it. 3.84 in the home run model for Donovan. He's got 3 on the season, a 138 ISO. He was hitting for a little bit more power before getting hurt last year. Putting decent bat on ball, 40.7% hard hits, 7.1% barrels. Low strikeout, you're going to get a lot of contact. You're going to get a bunch of shots at it. Give him that much. Lefty, not appealing though for him. But yeah, if it's good payout, wouldn't totally shock me. And you get into the Mets bullpen, and who knows what happens outside of Reed Garrett, who's been tremendous. So anyway, continuing with the Mets. Francisco Lindor, like I said at the top of the show when I briefly touched on this team when somebody asked about Kyle Gibson, we're just kind of doing it over again. Lindor, yeah, we're struggling at 207, 280, 393 and 150 plate appearances. He's got a 185 ISO, which isn't crazy far off the mark. He's got a 97 WRC+, so we're up to just 3% below average so far. He's got an 8% barrel rate, a 43.8% hard hit rate. Hard hits are right where they've been. Barrels are where they were 2 years ago, down a little bit in the small sample from last year, but not that far off the mark. Just 16% strikeouts, so we're getting a lot of balls in play. He's drawing an 8% walk rate. I don't think we're far off with Francisco Lindor. He's only 5,000, 3,300. Hitting ahead of Pete Alonso, who's 53-34 across sites. Alonso's got 8 home runs, but he's kind of scuffling too. 206, 295, 420. 420. Any cheap likes for that one? Alonso's got a 10.9% barrel rate. That's way down on a small sample. So is 28.7% hard hits. You know what I really like? The turnaround for Pete Alonso to just hit for a tremendous amount more power. Even with the limited premium contact so far, he's got the 8 home runs. He's still got a 214 ISO. JD Martinez hasn't done much in his 32 plate appearances so far since joining this team, but he's very cheap for a dude who hit 33 home runs last year. In the tiny sample of batted ball events, we're at a 15.8% barrel, 42.1% hard hits. It's probably like, 6, 7 batted ball events, if that. But in those small plate appearances, a small number of opportunities, it's been right where it was. No real questions about JD Martinez for the price. Jeff McNeil, you guys know I don't like 3,200, 2,500. Sitting at 231, 313, 308. When the BABIP's not there, Jeff McNeil's a dead spot in the lineup. Tyrone Taylor, a little bit of sneaky power upside. 2 home runs on the season, 288, 312, 425. Creating runs 13% better than average. A playable part if he's in the lineup. Brett Beatty, up to a respectable 113 WRC+. He's got 3 home runs, 269, 339, 375. It's going to be up and down through the season. What's weird is, typically I talk about a decent amount of hard hits out of him. So far this year, just a 30.9% hard hit rate, 4.9% barrel rate. Last year, that was 7.6% and 43.4%. I think there's more upside to come from Brett Beatty, who's supposed to be a good player over time. Just still kind of rounding into form for a young player. 3,000, 2,900 third base, not an ideal third baseman. If he's higher up in the lineup, they should probably actually swap him and Jeff McNeil in this lineup right now. Move him up to 6, let McNeil hit 8th or 9th. Omar Narvaez, skippable catcher. Thank you, Monty Pritchett. I appreciate that. Monty saying if you haven't yet, please smash the like button. It's the best MLB DFS rundown show. Rundown, show some support. Or best rundown show. But then some support wouldn't be there. Let's see. How could that work? This is the best MLB DFS rundown show. That's some support he gives us. That's how I'll play my misreading of your sentence. What else is going on out there? Ken Woodhouse. How are you, pal? Good to see you. So Manaea is on the board, but know that you're dealing probably with a 5-inning start. But the cards have been bad enough, especially at 7,800 from that mid-range. I do think that if you can afford it, that's better than all of the $6,000 bargain bin options, Andrew Heaney included. 7,500, you're just dealing with the shakiness on the quality start on FanDuel, but there's a little bit of appeal considering how bad the cards have been. I would take some cards bats against them, as we're discussing in the chat. I think there's some interesting spots there. Several of those long-time right-handed hitters, Goldie and Arenado most specifically, are still appealing to me. As many times as we've failed with the cards and as bad as they've been, I do think you could take some cheap value shots. Mets on the other side of Kyle Gibson. I think you could take some shots at Gibson, especially if he's starting to get popular at 7,300. I do think he's playable at 73 on DraftKings. 8,800 is a shakier proposition, but he's gotten to the innings requirement for quality starts in every one of his 6 outings this year. So there's something to be said for that potential alone on FanDuel. It's just I think other guys have higher ceilings. Tejas, Oakland. Let's see if we got either of these. My account may not be allowed to perform this action. All I want to do is reload the page, Elon. Oh, weird. I got logged out of Twitter. Hastings Kierstad coming back up. Is this can't be the most, no, that's from 2 weeks ago. What the fuck? Hold on. Now I'm going to try and remember my Twitter password live on air? Yes, let's do that. I don't think you guys can see this, can you? No. Bear with me one sec. We're going to get through all this and then it won't even matter because nothing will be updated. Hopefully that was the right one. All right, we're back. And all right, the Mets lineup was confirmed in that mix. Nimmo, Marte, Lindor, DJ Stewart. No, so no Pete Alonso. Bump to Kyle Gibson. Minor, but a little bit of a bump. Did Alonso get hurt over the weekend or something? Did he take a bump? Was he questionable for this game? I'd missed that if so. Oh, wait, no. DJ is no initials. JD is initials. So dumb. So Beatty does move up. I like that. Hitting 6th. Joey Wendell? Joey Wendell. McNeil does drop to 8th. And Tomas Nido slots in instead of Omar Narvaez. So it's a bit of a different look for the Mets, but most importantly, taking Pete Alonso out of the heart of the lineup does diminish that lineup a little bit for Kyle Gibson's upside. So a little bump, especially at 73 for Gibson. 88 on FanDuel. You're still dealing with, quality start, but what's the actual ceiling look like? But definitely a little bit better. DJ Stewart is off to an okay start for power. 4 home runs at 237 ISO. Very good premium contact profile from the left side. Not incapable of getting to a pitcher like Gibson. For a little bit of pop. And then Beatty moving up the lineup does look a little bit more appealing. Tomas Nido, total afterthought. Joey Wendell, also kind of an afterthought late in the lineup. A short Mets lineup. It's like a 6-man if you're going there. Still playable in that group of 6. But definitely makes me consider that Gibson spot a little bit more. It does not look like we have the Rangers lineup. Or the Athletics. So let's talk Andrew Heaney. It's a pitcher we've targeted for a long, long time based on all the power that he gives up, the unreliable nature with which he pitches. Every now and then he comes out and has a good game. He did that last time. We're looking at him with Washington. We talked, I believe that was the game where we talked a little bit about how Washington had been not as good against lefties, and maybe we could get a little value out of Heaney. So at least we both sided it a little in that one. He didn't spike a huge game. He gave up 1 earned run on 4 hits, but he worked 7 innings, faced 23 hitters, struck out 4, walked 0. Didn't give up a home run. That was a way more appealing start than against Seattle. He gave up 2 home runs, 4 earned runs on 5 hits, struck out 7, walked 0. 5 innings against the Braves at Atlanta the start before that. Another game where he gave up 2 home runs, struck out 5, walked 2, 3 earned runs total on 3 hits. Not a total meltdown, but when we're home run hunting against a pitcher, it's exactly where we want him. He's given up 5 homers on the season. It amounts to a 4% home run rate. A little bit more premium contact than that at 9.2% barrels, 46% hard hits, 91.5 miles an hour of exit velo on a 20.6 degree launch angle on average. Jibes completely with everything he's done over the past couple of years where he's been very gettable for home runs. You do see some strikeouts, 23.6% strikeouts and 147 and a third over 28 starts last year. 2 years ago, in a smaller sample, 14 starts, 72 and 2/3. Not a completely tiny sample. He was tremendous with a 35.5% strikeout rate. 3.10 ERA, 2.83 xFIP in that small sample. Tremendous stuff for strike throwing. Still gave up 11% barrels, 47.7% hard hits, 91 plus miles an hour of exit velo, and a 4.52% home run rate. So he was gettable when he wasn't striking you out, which is what we're always targeting with this pitcher. So I get why he's popular at 6,600 as a value play du jour from the bargain bin on DraftKings. Again, right there, if you go into the $6,000 tier, he was the guy I started with at the top of the show. It makes sense that he's got the most upside against this Athletics lineup. But I also think they've got some upside, and if we're deciding, the old, you're standing on a trap door and one button opens it and the other one keeps it closed, which one do you pick? I think I'm picking the Athletics. I'd rather take especially if they're low owned. They're very, very cheap. They've got a few productive enough hitters at the top. They've got a couple tremendous power bats that I don't dislike here. Going up against a pitcher that I always target with righties for home runs. Just because it's the Athletics doesn't mean it can't get there. And if they're low owned in this spot, especially on DraftKings, if this is the lineup, look at all those multi-position eligible guys for those low prices. The highest price guy in that lineup is $4,300 for Esteury Ruiz. They're very cheap. I believe you guys. There's a login to rotoscouts from my new device. I think they mean this device, but this is the one that's always been logged on. Whatever. Your shit's broken, Elon. And I'm not just talking about the Cybertruck. Dennis 4G, damn it, Terry, missed my exit on the highway. Listen, you get to figure that compliment out. Sorry about that, buddy. So yeah, the A's, it's an interesting spot. I got to pull up ownership. That's what I was about to do. I want to see for myself, even though I believe you guys, that they're projected for low ownership, or at least see what they are on a competing site. Wow. Nobody above like 5.5% per RGs on FanDuel. I got to assume it's fairly similar on DK. Actually, it's probably even lower on DK because everybody's going to Heaney, I would think. Yep. Mid-single digits at worst. That's an interesting leverage spot. I'm totally willing to attack Andrew Heaney here with these Athletics, as bad as they are. As much as I don't love Brent Rooker, I'm kind of enthusiastic about him today. 4,000 on DraftKings, 3,300 on FanDuel. He's the only guy in the projected lineup above the magic number for home runs at 10.45. You can make a fair enough argument that J.D. Davis deserves a little bit more upside than that. J.D. Davis's problem is he doesn't ever turn it into game power. As much hard hit and as much barrel as he gets, it only results in last year it was 18 home runs in 546. Year before in 365, it was 12 home runs. He's always hitting the ball really, really hard. And especially against lefties, he's got a lot of power upside. But that's why it's a little bit lower than maybe it would seem like it should be just for the actual home runness of it. But a 47.6% hard hit rate, a 9.5% barrel rate in his tiny sample of 62 plate appearances this year. Rooker at 19.6% barrels and 50% hard hits over 89. He's got 8 home runs, a monster 359 ISO, a 615 slug so far. Andrew Heaney could strike both of those hitters out 3 times each. That might be 6 strikeouts and a 0 right there. But there's also power upside. I want both of those hitters in my lineup if I'm stacking A's. Ruiz hit for a bunch of power in the small sample down in the minors. Over 50 plate appearances in the show. He's got 2 home runs. He's got a 238 ISO, 12.5% barrel rate, 40.6% hard hits. He's stolen 4 bases with a 347 on base. Love the option if he's hitting at the top of the lineup. Somebody mentioned Nevin in the chat, multi-position eligible for 31 on DraftKings. Triple position for 27 on FanDuel. You also get Abraham Toro, triple position. Both of them at the corners, but then you get a differentiator with outfield and second base for very cheap pricing for 2 players who have been good in the early part of the season. 102 plate appearances for Nevin. He's hit 4 home runs. He's slashing 289, 363, 444. He's got 38% better than average WRC plus. Putting bat on ball pretty effectively, not striking out that much. Toro also not striking out that much. Both of them outperforming last year's strikeout rates, but underperforming the walk rates they posted last year. Toro not really hitting the ball all that hard, but did have a 15.4%. I think it's a fairly small sample. Yeah, it's 21 plate appearances. Ignore the last year's sample for Toro. So far this year, though, 3 home runs, a stolen base, creating runs 21% better than average in 114 opportunities with a respectable triple slash. Very, very cheap. First and second base for him for 35 on DraftKings. First, second, and third on FanDuel. Another power bat to follow these two. 7 home runs so far out of Shea Langoliers. 255 ISO. Doing exactly what we expect Shea Langoliers to do. Last year he had a 13.3% barrel rate, a 44.2% hard hit rate. He was always playable as a late lineup cheap catcher for home run power. Hit 22 home runs and 490 plate appearances last year. Had a 208 ISO. A lot of people overlook Shea Langoliers when it comes to power, But that's all he really does. He was 13% worse than average for run creation doing that. Had a 268 on base, a 205 average. It's not a good hitter, but for a cheap catcher, for DFS purposes, perfectly fine for home run hunting, especially against Andrew Heaney. Another hitter who might just strike out 3 times. He's at 22.8% this year, but last year in a full sample, 29.2%. These guys were more gettable for strikeouts last year. Max Schumann, Darrell Hernaiz, and Brett Harris, mix and match parts, let's call them at best at the bottom of the lineup. I think you really want 1 through 6 if you're stacking this A's lineup, or at least 1 through 6 in this version of it. The Texas side seems a little bit more clear-cut to me. Like I said at the top of the show, kind of a low run total. 4.03 with a 7.5 for the game. Against Alex Wood, who has a 6.32 ERA, a 5.10 xFIP, a 19% strikeout rate with an 11.1% walk rate. Ton of premium contact allowed so far this year in 7 starts, 31 1/3. In 97 2/3 last year, he had a 4.33 and a 5.14 with a 17.2% strikeout rate. Year before that, a 5.10 ERA with a 3.41. That's a respectable xFIP, decent strikeout rate, 130 2/3 over 26 starts. I think this was the last time Alex Wood is ever going to be, reasonably good. Seems pretty gettable with the Rangers here. Their prices have come down or haven't gone up yet. So you get Semien and Seager pretty cheap at the top of the lineup. Seager's at just a 69 WRC plus, a .063 ISO, 2 home runs. If you believe that this is going to continue for much longer, we have different opinions, let's put it that way. 159 plate appearances for Semien, 5 home runs, a stolen base, a 169 ISO. He's been okay, but he's also underperformed. But the price down, $3,900 for Semien, $3,600 for Seager on FanDuel, 55 and 54 for those 2 players on DraftKings. I promise at some point they're going to raise Nathaniel Lowe's price, so get him while he continues to be cheap. He hasn't budged. $4,100 at first base on DraftKings, $3,000 on FanDuel. I think he maybe has gone up from $2,800 on FanDuel over the past few days. Over his first 60 plate appearances this year, 327, 417, 442. Creating runs 50% better than average. He's got a home run. He's got a stolen base. He scored 9 times. Dude is a really good hitter. Striking out at just a 16.7% clip so far. That's down from 22.8 in a small sample. It'll probably go back up to like this level, but he's always drawn a lot of walks. He's always been good at getting on base. He hit 27 home runs 2 years ago. He hit 17, I think, last year. It's a tremendous left-handed bat for as cheap as he is in between these 3 hitters. Adolis Garcia, the team star, $5,900, $4,200. Probably should be a $6,000 player on DraftKings. 286, 336, 532. 246 ISO, 8 homers, 4 steals. Creating runs 41% better than average. Going up against a weak left-handed pitcher. Kind of like the spot for Adolis Garcia to succeed. Jonah Heim, Josh H. Smith, some playable parts. 4,200, 2,900 is pretty cheap for Jonah Heim's bat at the catcher position. 4 home runs already this season, a 111 WRC plus. Hit 18 in 501 chances last year. Josh Smith, 2,800 triple position. I can't really argue with the production so far this year. 293, 402, 475. Creator runs 52% better than average. I don't think he's this good. Hasn't been in the past, but still cheap triple position eligibility. Where I question a little bit more is 4,000 at third base on DraftKings. I don't love that unless we got him, oddly at the top of the lineup. Ezekiel Duran for 2,700, first and third, also not ideal. Playable because he's so cheap over there. At 2,300, he's got quad position eligibility on FanDuel, which is fun. Hasn't done anything in 56 plate appearances really this year. Last year, 14 home runs, 8 steals, and 439, slash 276, 324, 443. Creator runs 7% better than average. Not a tremendous standout, but made pretty decent contact in that sample as well. Probably a little bit more upside to come. Evan Carter, 45-34, totally playable, 5 home runs, 2 steals, creating runs 17% better than average, a 227 ISO. Even in a cold start, he's been pretty playable, just not a great spot in the lineup. And then Leody Taveras was good last year, 14 homers, 14 steals, hasn't done anything really this year. The Rangers bats are definitely a yes for me against Alex Wood. Alex Wood is probably a no, even at the extreme bargain bin price, $5,500 on DraftKings. I think it's just a really, really thin path to success. Just thinking about where that low run total might be coming from, I was thinking, maybe it's super cold in Oakland in the Bay Area today. It's 58 degrees for game time, it looks like. 61 at 9 p.m., 58 at 10 p.m. These are East Coast times. Trending down into the lower 50s. So it's not ideal baseball weather, but the wind is blowing out. It's not like it's a strong headwind on top of that. I don't think it's a spot where the Rangers should be this low in terms of that implied run total. So I kind of like them. Don't really like Alex Wood. Do like the A's and probably prefer the A's if Heaney is the much higher owned side of that. Wow. Just saw where that ownership's at. Yeah, on DraftKings, I just think the move is find a way to pay for Sean Manaea at 78 or Kyle Gibson at 73, honestly. Even Woods Richardson for 7,000. Find a way, find $400 more and take the strikeout upside there. I would just rather target Heaney. Again, I do think among the, call it 7,500 or everybody below Sean Manaea's price, I do think he's actually got the most ceiling, but not with half the field on him. I would so much rather just take the power upside against a pitcher that I target all the time. All the time. Rooker, J.D. Davis, most importantly, Estuary Ruiz, Nevin, Toro, Shea Langoliers. Top 6 in this version of the lineup are very interesting, given the cheap pricing, the multi-position eligibility on all of these players, the power upside. Could absolutely fail. There is not nearly a guarantee. We're talking about the Oakland Athletics here. On a full slate of 150 lineups, I absolutely think Heaney shares belong in your portfolio, and probably a lot of them. I don't think half of your DraftKings lineup should include Andrew Heaney. A quarter of them, sure. Undercut the field by half. On FanDuel at 77, I think you could get away with it if you need a value pitcher, if you're building a bunch of lineups, but he's probably popular there too. Same situation. I prefer the A's bats. I really do. As uncomfortable as that might sound. Mama's getting way too excited about the Oakland stack now. Everybody in the chat is getting paid. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe. You guys rock. 49. We were up as high as 60 some odd people here I saw a little while ago. It's only 5:12. It's early for us, but we're on the last game. Hour 42 into the show. It's an interesting 6-gamer. Roderick Munoz, 7,200, 7,400. This is probably where the nice little story over 2 starts comes crashing down. It just doesn't seem like the spot to go to him, at least for DFS purposes. I don't think he's necessarily cheap enough, given where these other guys are priced. He's going up against the Dodgers. Just seems like an atrocious spot. Against Colorado, he struck out 7. He walked 2. He had 1 earned run allowed on 3 hits over 6 innings. He was very, very good in that start. If you remember, I was saying, hey, maybe we target this guy with some Rockies bats in that one. Rockies on the road against a righty. Worst situation in baseball, but hey, why not? They're going to be low owned. A couple of these guys are good. Yeah, well, it worked out for Roderick Munoz. I would go back to it in that situation, and I'll absolutely double down on that stance if you want to let me do that with the Dodgers. Definitely think it's a targetable spot. He also struck out 7 Cubs at Wrigley. That was a good game. Gave up 2 home runs, though. Those were the only 2 hits and 2 earned runs that he gave up, but he did give up 2 home runs. In the small sample, 7.5 points below average for Stuff Plus. He's given up a 16.7% barrel rate, 4.88% home runs, but that's the 2 home runs to, 41 hitters. 34.1% strikeout rate in that same tiny sample. Those 16% barrels in that small sample had me kind of concerned against a team like the Dodgers. You get Mookie Betts off the top in 170 plate appearances. Mookie's only slashing 352, 459, 577 with a 225 ISO. He's only hit 6 home runs and stolen 8 bases. He's only created runs 98% better than average. If that's not good enough for you, Ohtani's hit 10 home runs, stolen 7 bases, created runs 112% better than average. Ohtani's got a 24.1% barrel rate and a 59.5% hard hit rate. Tremendous hitter. 364, 426, 685 for Ohtani. Freddie Freeman, the underperformer amongst these stars at the top of the lineup. He's all the way down to 3,300. That's shocking. I think this is completely unjustified to dip Freddie Freeman that far when he's slashing 293, 411, 429, creating runs 45% better than average. Yeah, he's only got 2 home runs and a stolen base. The power's been down a little bit. Still a 40.2% hard hit rate. We're not that far off the hard hit mark from last year. A few fewer barrels, which has resulted in a few fewer home runs. But it's not like he's like suddenly striking out a ton. 17.2%, 16.6 last year. Walking a little bit more than he did last year. Getting on base at a ridiculous clip. Like, he's does not belong at 3,300 on FanDuel. That's a price to take advantage of. 5,800, maybe that's a correct discount on DraftKings for the quote struggles so far. He's been tremendous. Will Smith, superstar catcher, 5,100 in the cleanup spot. Cheaper than the Contrerases for similar quality. 347, 396, 534. Obviously a better lineup around him. 4 home runs on the season, 186 ISO, creating runs 61% better than average. Only strikes out 14.2% of the time. It's a fantastic hitting catcher. Max Muncy for 46-36, 8.78 in the home run model. Will Smith's got an 8. Teoscar Hernandez has an 8.29. Andy Pages at 6.25 is also kind of interesting. There's just a ton of power. There's a ton of quality there. Those 4 hitters could probably be hitting 1 through 4 on a lot of teams in baseball. Right here, they're just kind of the heart of the lineup. They're all a little bit cheap because everybody has to be, you have to be able to click these guys together somehow. So they can only go so high for these guys. But Muncy's got 8 home runs. Teoscar's got 8 home runs. 290 ISO for Muncy with a 157 WRC+. 216 ISO for Teoscar with a 127. Over 74 plate appearances. Pages also already has hit 4 home runs. 319, 338, 565 start for him. 246 ISO. He's created runs 54% better than average. Very solid contact profile, doing exactly what he's expected to do. So just a tremendous bat to add to this lineup late. If it's Gavin Lux and James Outman at the bottom of the lineup, they've very much underperformed to start the season. But these are 2 players that I think are talented guys. I really expect a pretty dramatic turnaround from both of these hitters as time goes on. So by the low end, by the upside, 3,225 for Outman, 2,824. 2 lefty bats to get against a middling right-handed pitcher. If you don't remember when Munoz went through multiple organizations last year, was with the Braves, then went to, what was it, the Pirates, somebody else. Went through like 3 stops on getting DFA'd before landing here. The Nationals and the Pirates, as well as the thin pitching Braves, all passed on him, all DFA'd him over the last 12, 16 months. And now he's caught on with Miami. He's a 24-year-old. The point is, not a high-end prospect. Probably overperformed those first 2 starts. And facing the Dodgers. Lethal spot. Walker Buehler for 9,300 on DraftKings. I think he's firmly on the board. Just you're paying full freight for him. At 8,300, he's really interesting on FanDuel. That's a price for a pitcher who's only worked, 1-2 rehab starts. He's been out for almost 2 years, almost exactly 2 years. It's been a minute for Walker Buehler. But we're talking about a pitcher with a high 20s, 28 point something percent strikeout rate for his career. Fantastic career numbers. When we last knew Walker Buehler, he was an ace. Maybe not the highest strikeout ace, but he was the ace of the Dodgers staff, with apologies to the always hurt Clayton Kershaw at the time. For his career, 27% strikeout rate, not 28. 27% strikeout rate, a 6% walk rate, a 3.02 ERA with a 3.64 xFIP, a 3.80 FIP, and a 3.60 SIERA over 106 starts in his career. I think he's fully stretched. He made 6 starts in the minors this season for rehab. First one was in either AA or high A, but then the next 5 were in AAA. In the most recent start, he went 6 innings. Again, I do think that we're dealing probably with, it was 19 2/3 total innings in 5 AAA outings. 4.12 ERA, but a 5.05 xFIP, a 23.9% strikeout rate. But again, as I've said before, rehab starts, I don't really care about your stats. I care more about the depth, working on pitches, just getting stretched out. And the stats are not all that terrible, all that far off the mark. So we're probably fine. The issue becomes, what does the major league pitching stress point do for the innings total? But at 8,300, especially given some strikeout upside against the weak Marlins, it's kind of appealing, even if he doesn't book 6 innings on a quality start. If we get that win that I expect to get, if he goes 5 innings, 5 1/3, something like that, handful of strikeouts, win bonus on top. For the money, I'm not sure that the gap is so significant between him and the top starters of the day that he's out of play on FanDuel. At 9,300, he does need to perform well in a 5-inning start. If you get 6 out of him, I think there's additional upside for sure on DraftKings that justifies it. But the way he plays against the top of the slate is a little bit different at that price with these guys at these prices than at this price with those guys at those prices. So I think he's a little bit better, oddly, with the innings question at 83 on FanDuel than at 93 on DraftKings. But I think he's playable on both sides. I like the path to success for Walker Buehler here. It's a pitcher I've always liked over time. And we've succeeded with a number of times. So I think it's another spot where we're just dealing with a get him while he's cheap opportunity. He might be completely shaky, especially if he goes a short start, give up a couple runs, and then you're burnt if he only goes 5. So it comes with question marks. It doesn't come with like a huge endorsement for a hedge position. I think you can hedge with some Marlins, but it's not like you'd be dealing with a weak bullpen on the back end of it. You've got a very good pitcher in most cases to start the game, and you've got a really low-end Marlins lineup now with no eyes at the top anymore. If you get Jazz in the leadoff spot, he's obviously playable. He's their best player, 5,300, 3,400. But you're talking about a guy with a 26.4% strikeout rate this year, a 30.7% for a full year last, or a mid-size sample last year. He missed some time last year. So far this year, 4 home runs, 7 steals, just 1% better than average creating runs, just getting on at a 319 clip, 234 average. Not ideal for a leadoff spot. Brian De La Cruz has 6 home runs, solid 181 ISO, creating runs 15% better than average. Everybody else in the lineup except for Vidal Brujan at 116 WRC plus has been below average for run creation. If this is the lineup, the 9-man batting average is 219. On base is 280 with a 328 slug, a 109 ISO, and an average WRC plus mark of 74. Yes, these are small samples of plate appearances. Not much of that matters, except for the fact that a lot of these guys haven't been good over time either. I do believe there's a little bit of power in Jesus Sanchez's bat, but he's never really delivered in a full sample at the major league level. He hit 14 home runs, /253, 327, 450 in his best year last year over 402 plate appearances. He created runs 9% better than average with a 197 ISO. Year before, 13 home runs with a low-end triple slash. So far this year, pretty low end, 2 home runs, weak ISO, making very good contact, 9% barrels, 49.3% hard hits. I do think the power comes around, but I question what he really is in the long term. Josh Bell's been bad, both sides of the plate, 4 home runs, 197, 293, 311, 79 WRC plus. Tim Anderson died sometime last year or the year before, just completely lost at the plate for the last couple seasons. Played his way out of Chicago, took him forever to find a job, landed in Miami, has done nothing to justify the salary. Nick Gordon, Vidal Brujan, Emmanuel Rivera, Nick Fortes, everybody's pretty skippable in this lineup. Again, especially going up against Walker Buehler. I do think you can, call it a contrarian spot all you want. And yeah, if they happen to get to Walker Buehler, you might see some people spike a decent lineup with some cheap Marlins bats. But I just prefer, if the A's are going to be equally low owned against Andrew Heaney, why would I attack Walker Buehler with a worse Marlins team? Right? Just makes sense. So I think that's the go-to spot. It's also possible that, again, the Athletics might be under-projected in that spot in terms of ownership, especially if idiots like me are out there gabbing about it, advising everybody to go to it. Maybe they get more popular. But with half the slate on Heaney, these guys are more interesting than the Marlins are against Walker Buehler any day of the week. And that is that, as they say, gang. Mom is feeling like the Oprah of DFS today. Home runs equal Contreras, MJ Melendez, Jazz Chisholm. It's out there. David Soto, we opened there, and I'll remind everybody it's a good note. Both sites have moved the slates up from 7:40 to 7:10 p.m. The start of the Royals-Brewers game was moved up because of weather. Weather's coming in on the back end of that game, but starting a half hour earlier than they were gonna. Should play fine. Really like Cole Raggins in that spot. That brings us back to the pitching board. Raggins, number 2 spot on both sites. 9,500, 8,800, little bit cheap on both, particularly at the 88 on DraftKings. That's just super, super interesting. Luis Castillo, I think justifiably 10-2, 9-6 on both sites, the highest priced pitcher, highest projection on the board. Super gettable Twins lineup despite some recent production. As we looked at, I think there are strikeouts hiding in that Twins lineup with some guys overperforming their histories for strikeouts so far. Luis Castillo and the rest of this Mariners pitching staff the rest of this week, pretty good position to find some strikeouts and exploit the weaknesses in that Twins lineup and not give up a bunch of runs. So really like him. Yu Darvish, 8,500, 8,400 in good pitching conditions in Chicago. I don't like him against the opposing lineup, just, matchup for matchup, but I do think the conditions help. I think the price is excellent for his upside, for his ceiling, even against a quality lineup. Buehler at 8,300. You can see how he plays against the top of the board there on FanDuel. On DraftKings at 93, like I said, I think it just plays differently against everybody else on the slate. I do think he can succeed. I do think he can go 6 innings here. It's a very weak lineup on the other side. Just a more interesting spot on FanDuel, but very playable on DraftKings. Sean Manaea, if you can get there for salary, I like him better than all the bargain bin pitchers on DraftKings. He's slightly above that level. It's a good enough matchup against St. Louis. This could be the day where the Cards break out. It's been like a 2-year slump at this point. But Manaea's got upside. It's just that you're dealing with like a 5-inning start in most cases for him. So the FanDuel ceiling is a little bit low, but 7,500, the price is fine. I prefer him. That's actually a spot that I didn't really hit on that much. At 75, if you're looking in the bargain bin on FanDuel, that's a lot more workable. On DraftKings, you get Gibson at 73 as an alternative, and Manaea is 78. So that's a little bit closer of a gap. That's a more interesting conversation. On FanDuel, I think it's just kind of straightforward. If you're looking for a cheap pitcher, with Gibson at 88, I'd rather pay, I think, 75 for Sean Manaea, even in a 5-inning start, than taking my shots with Heaney, even against the Athletics at 77, with the entire weight of the world on him. Seems like a better angle. Justin Steele, I just think is too high priced for what I expect to be a short start. I think we're dealing with 5 innings, just given the lack of rehab time, the fact that he made 1 start all season at the beginning of the year. So I just think we're going 5. If he goes more than 5, he's got upside. But I kind of like the pods on the other side of that one. Gibson, again, does have that $7,300 price tag on DraftKings is definitely in play. 88 is just less interesting on FanDuel. We've got a very good shot at a quality start from him. So there is that. Woods Richardson is not uninteresting, especially at 7,000. If you need to get even cheaper than Gibson, but you don't want to go to Andrew Heaney, I think Woods Richardson is your guy. 7,000, a little bit less expensive. I prefer the Mariners side of that. I really like the home run potential for the Mariners, but they've been scuffling, and there are major, major strikeouts in that lineup. I don't think Woods Richardson's necessarily the guy to go find him, but at 7,000, the price is at least right. Bryce Wilson, Alex Wood, and Roderick Munoz kind of nose across the board, although Wilson at just 6,300, 6,200, if he has a start where he lasts 6 innings, gets to a quality start, finds a few strikeouts, I could see it. He's probably the last dart I would throw. It is a short but kind of deep, oddly, pitching slate, given that I think that is the true cut line. I would not play a lot of Bryce Wilson. That's a low faith play. I would probably not play that much Simeon Woods Richardson unless I really wanted to avoid these other bargain bin guys. It's the only angle on which he really gets into many DraftKings lineups. He's really not a great option on FanDuel. I think there's just better plays on FanDuel. But a lot of this from the middle down is kind of in play on a mixed slate. I just greatly prefer the top end. And like I said, with these guys at 88 and 84, I think you can just mix and match your way through these top options and just kind of ignore the bargain bin as a different kind of approach. Right? If I'm spending, what's that? 16.2, 8,100 apiece for Yu Darvish and Sean Manaea. It's not bad. If I want to go those two, it's 17.2, 8,600. Not bad. Home run board. Julio's going to still be at the top of this when we resort it. So again, a lot of Seattle power shining through. I'm glad that worked out. I actually had to find a final word to stick in there with Luke Raley at 8.38. So there's a lot of power showing in the model for Seattle. They also, again, ton of strikeouts, but they're very cheap. They are better than they have been. So I'm kind of interested. Ohtani's obvious. So is Mookie. So are any of the other Dodgers that are on here, like Max Muncy, Teoscar Hernandez, Will Smith. Any of these guys is also Freddie Freeman. Any of these guys is also a very, very interesting one-off at the end of the night in that spot. If you can't get to the full Dodger stack, or if you don't want to, just given that really high run total, all the power that's on board for them, they're expensive, but they're well worth getting to in one-off shares. And you can pick your poison as far as like the lowest owned guy, the guy with the most home run upside, the guy with the most highest price, the superstars. It's a lot to work with in that Dodgers lineup. Brent Rooker right there from the A's. Liking that at 10.45. In retrospect, if I had realized how low owned the A's were going to be, I would have made that the home run pick of the day. I probably would have. Much as I don't love Brent Rooker. We're getting way too excited about this A stack on this slate. Shea Langolier's down here. J.D. Davis, Tyler Nevin right there. Esteury Ruiz is interesting from the top of that lineup. Goldie and Arenado right here from the St. Louis lineup. You've also, actually all three of them. Right in a row. 8.11, 8.09, 8.01. Playable enough St. Louis stack. It's just they've been so bad, and we're probably looking to take some Manaea shares there. The Royals, Vinny Pasquantino, Sal Perez, Bobby Witt. I really like that side of that game as well. It's the early one now. It's the one that moved up. But we talked a lot about this game. I really like Cole Ragans. Love the DraftKings price. Perfectly happy paying the FanDuel price. And I like some of these bats through this lineup. Hunter Renfroe hitting sixth is not completely uninteresting for the 27-25. He's been really bad this year. 3 home runs. But one last time. He's hit 80 home runs over the last 3 years. It was 20 last year and 60 the 2 years before. Not uninteresting. Darren Blanco, considering how many stolen bases he gets for the few times he's been on base, he's got 8 stolen bases in 27 plate appearances, only getting on at a 296 clip, and last year 24 steals in 138 plate appearances. Dude's got speed, if nothing else. If you get him on for 2,100, 2,400, just tie him right back to the top of the lineup. Not uninteresting. Mama's saying KC and Oakland stacks, St. Louis stacks for the chip. Woo! Boy, you're not going to hear that too often. But I don't disagree. I kind of like KC in Seattle. But I do like those Oakland guys. I got to see if I can work Brent Rooker in as a one-off at least, something. But with that, you guys, I'm going to go get things updated. It's 5:30. We've got a 7:10 start, not a 7:40 start now. You guys absolutely rock. Hit the like button for me one last time. Hit the subscribe button. Well, don't hit it again if you've already hit it. But if you haven't hit it, go ahead and hit it. acemind.io for your sim needs, for your optimizer needs. Very cheap prices, very, very inexpensive prices, for a high-end product. MLB, NBA, NFL, MMA, PGA, all the different major sports. More to come from those guys. Your first 3 days there are always for free. Promo code rotoscouts, all in caps, gets you 20% off your first month. acemind.io. Check those guys out. Jump into our Discord if you're not there. Check out rotoscouts.com. The projections update will be up very, very shortly once I get the lineups updated. That's all I can think to say. See you guys. Somebody out there go win something. Good luck tonight. I think I said that the wrong way around for the first time. Good luck tonight. Somebody out there go win something. I'll see you tomorrow.